detectable error. People
true.
look at it and their eyes will go, okay, I know what it was.
Okay, so looks like we are now live. Good afternoon / morning / evening, everyone. Welcome to the. Okay, so oh snap, what's happening? Looks like we are now live.
You still have it open in the tab.
Yeah. Okay. I'm really good at computers. Okay, well, with that, we are live twice to the CPC meeting for August the 20th. We're with members of the OpenJS Foundation Cross-Project Council. The meetings doc is in the chat. I'll paste it again. Let's get rolling with any public announcements anyone has.
I was just going to comment that the schedule for Node+JS Interactive is out. So if you're interested, take a look, and we'd really like to see you there.
Amazing. Anything else? All right, groovy. With that, let's move on to items that we're following up on from last time. We'll start with number 285, the jQuery project infrastructure. Last week, the action item was to continue the conversation we started with Dave and others in the infra Slack channel. And I was going to look into scheduling an infra working group meeting. We opened a poll for that on Doodle, and I closed the poll this morning. We selected August the 26th, that's a Monday, at 1800 UTC for the for a continuation of this conversation. I'm not sure if there's any other action that needs to be addressed on this right now, but any questions or follow on?
My only comment was, does this need to stay on the agenda?
Probably not. If we're gonna delegate the topic of what to do to a working group, the working group can probably propose an issue that to reopen it or to bring it back onto the CPC.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Rather than it coming up next week, and if we don't have anything specific to talk about.
Okay, cool. We can remove the tag then for next time. All right. Moving on to number 307. This is, I'm sorry, the number 275. This is swapping references to TAC with CPC. Last week's action item was that Michael Dolan and Miles Bourne were going to follow up on this. Miles, do you have any updates?
This is the swapping references.
Mm-hmm.
Just waiting for clarity from the board. Our meeting is on Friday, so by Friday, definitely have something figured out. But the biggest one right now is just figuring out how do we handle this when we don't have, what's the word I'm thinking of? Like, we have an email thread. There's no objections. It's pretty straightforward, but we just don't have like a process or policy around these kinds of approvals via email. So we'll work that out in the next call. I do notice that we have some attendees that need to be promoted. Oh, you got them.
Just added them. Great, thank you, Miles. So just as a reminder, that's just errata that we're looking to.
Yeah, I'm going to remove the agenda item from this. We have the approvals on it, and the only thing that we need is just like a +1 from the board, and then it could land.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess semi-related to that, I'd had a quick chat with Chris over Slack, and I think we're going to create a board that looks like what we have in admin. So like issues that have been taken to the board. So I think this is a good example of something we can have in there just so that we remember to follow it up, and then can close it out of there once we've got the board answer.
All right, moving on to issue number 289. we discussed this last week and determined that the action item was that we would need somebody to open a PR to address the clarifications that Toby raised. It looks like Miles opened a PR on number 305 to address this. Miles, do you want to talk about what you did here?
The main substance of the change is in the charter. It changes the term maintainer to governing body. And instead of saying a collaborator within a project elected to represent a project, says a group of collaborators within a project elected to represent the project in an official decision-making role. Still not, the best. I don't like the project elected to represent the project, but I'm not going to bite shed too much on that language. Maintainer itself within the charter only appeared twice. It appeared once in the definition of contributor and again under the section of non-responsibility. In each instance, it was being used as maintainers, not maintainer. So there was like just a copy paste of governing body to replace maintainers just worked. We can bring this to the board to ensure that there's no concerns on Friday, but we do need, I guess, a few more +1s in here. And then I'm assuming we probably at the very least want to have a similar waiting period to what we do for governance, but I don't think we have an explicit amount of time that we have in the governance.
We should check that because there might be something about charter changes.
There is something about charter changes in the governance. Specifically, it says pull requests that change the charter must meet the following conditions in addition to the ones listed for changing the governance. Oh, okay. So then it's 14 days.
Right.
Or consensus is reached in a meeting with quorum of voting members. So today, I don't think we have quorum of voting members.
No.
Yeah.
But if we did next week, then we could move it forward as long as the board +1.
Do you have a link for that, Miles?
Yeah, I can drop that in the chat.
All right. Sounds good. Any other questions or comments on that PR or that issue? Cool. We'll move on to.
Sorry, just before you go ahead. So Miles, have you already sent it to the board, or is that something that Chris or I need to do?
So I have been like keeping on top of it with Brian just because it was my my PR, but maybe what we should.
I'm happy if you have. I just want to make sure that we're not slipping through the cracks. That's all.
Yeah, but I should probably also do a better job of transitioning those responsibilities. I'm just like anxious and I just do it right away. But maybe that board that you're talking about could serve as like a source of truth that things could be put on, and then Brian could look at that instead of relying on any individual.
Yeah, it's kind of, and any one of us can look at it and say, okay, when we go to the board, let's make sure we cover these things off.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, I'll create that board later on today, and then yeah, we can start using that. But if you've got this one covered, that was really all I was asking.
Yeah, I just pinged Brian again.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, ready for me to move on?
Yep.
Cool. Number 288 is related in that we identified possibly duplication of onboarding checklists, and last week's action item was that Joe was going to add some templates to the CPC. I know he wasn't able to make time for that, but we also got another pull request related to this for cleanup from Miles. That's pull request number 304. Miles, do you want to share this work as well?
Yeah, I mean, this one doesn't seem to have consensus about what to do. I just got it like something going. So we have the onboarding checklist existing in 2 different places in the repo. It exists in the template for new project application. It's under the heading onboarding checklist. And it's also in .github/issue template/project onboarding checklist. And so there's kind of like a couple different things, like having it duplicated means that if we change it in one place, another place could end up kind of falling behind, which is less than ideal. Although if we remove it from the issue template, then it's a pain in the butt to go and copy and paste it. But then if we have it only in the template, it's not really in the most discoverable place unless you go to make an issue, which is something that you would be doing after the incubation phase. So I don't think that there's really a right answer here. I do think that the number of times that people are going to be creating new issues will likely be lower than the number of people who will be looking at the new project application just to get an idea of what the process is, which is the reason why I set it up the way that I did. But we've got, everything from I think that we should swap it to I don't see a problem in the duplication. So we definitely don't have consensus on how to move forward here. And I personally, it's not a hill I'm going to die on. I'm quite flexible depending on what people think is best, including just closing it.
What was the drawback to, like, I'm looking at the PR. So the drawback is you have to click through one more link or something more than that?
The drawback to the way that the PR is set up right now is that if you make a new issue, you need to click through to the other link and then copy paste it over instead of it just being there.
Sorry, I guess for some reason I'm not quite following that. Like if you create a new issue, the template will basically be pre-populated for you, right?
It will not. After this pull request, you will have to click through to a link that's in the template to copy and paste the checklist from.
Oh, okay. I thought it was the other way around, that like if you found the template in the other place, you could click to get to the template and you'd look at it, but okay.
That's a possibility too.
Because I think the other way I'd have no problem, right? Because then if you created one, you'd automatically get it. And if you went and discovered it in the other place, you can, have a link to the template, which is one extra click, but not a big deal, right?
Yeah, I'd be happy to make that change. So it would be to remove the checklist from the proposal doc and instead put a link to the checklist that's inside of the issue template.
Right.
Okay. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Toby speaking here. I'm sorry I'm making you all lose so much time on something that's such a small issue. From my perspective, the only thing I was really interested in was to know which one was the source of truth. And just the fact that there were like two long lists that I had to like visually compare was like annoying. So I was just wondering if the other option could not be just to say, well, one of it is a source of truth and actually write that on top of it and add maybe a comment to the other one that, that's a copy of the other one. So folks just make the corrections in the right place when they do. Just inform both people who are contributing content and those that are reading it, which one is the right one, is the other option I see.
So which one is canonical and which one is just like, because we wanted to make someone's life a little easier, we've also copied it here.
Yes.
And that's kind of my thinking about why I did it this way, because my impression was the template is something that's being generated for convenience, whereas the application is like a canonical document. But yeah, I mean, whatever, if there's links there, it's fine. Just having things in an issue template doesn't seem like it's official.
But unless we say we refer to it from the other one, I don't see how that's too much less official, but.
I mean, like in theory, perhaps like the checklist should be in the project progression doc instead. Can I suggest that perhaps we time box this and just kick it off to the issue and try to reach consensus in there about where it should be?
I agree with that. There's a super clear thing, but I think Toby's point's super valid. If we can figure out a way to signal which is the canonical, we can probably wrap this up in the issue, async. Okay, cool. Moving to issue number 287. This is about our beloved Code and Learn well, I guess more specifically, Rich and Anna's beloved Code and Learn. Our action item was pinging the TSC, Node TSC, ComCom admin channels, also making sure that we spoke with Rich and Anna about lifting this as an OpenJS cross-project initiative. Manil or Christian, do either of you want to speak to this?
Go for it, Christian, if you have it.
Yeah, I just want to add that I haven't been able to respond on which response yet, but I would like to add some suggestions to it.
I think to summarize Rich's responses, our initial goal to lift it, well, keep changing the format. I think our main reason for lifting it was we wanted to use the opportunity of extending it beyond Node.js to also change up the format, because it's been something that has burned out some people to organize, and their suggestions have been to make sure that whatever format we take, we do prioritize lowering the amount of upfront effort it would take to prepare for this. So we've riffed on a couple of ideas to do that so far.
The one thing I might throw in my thought is, I don't know if we want to change the term. The Code and Learn part was a very specific concept. Whereas I could see something with, the goal was to try and drive engagement, help people get engaged. As we go up a level, the code part might be harder, but other pieces might be easier. Is it getting involved in the foundation type session? I don't know what a good title is, but I just throw that out, that maybe even just shifting the title would make sense.
I mean, it's also worth noting that I don't think the original intent maybe played out as well. The intent that was just stated, I should say, just played out as well as maybe was hoped. I think we've, if you take 100% of the people who contribute at each Code and Learn event, there's maybe 1% who continue to be involved in the project in any way. They usually end up making that contribution and dropping off, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I also do want to make sure we set up the expectation for foundation projects that this isn't a way to get a bunch of contributors, or at least it hasn't been for Node.
We've gotten a couple key contributors, but in terms of volume, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and I mean, you can very much see that in the contribution graph for Node, where every time there's a Code and Learn event, there's a massive spike and then it returns to normal. And those, contributions are one time, basically. So if you have something like tests that need help, it's a great way to achieve that. And having the incentive of getting a commit is really cool for a lot of people, and also having the incentive of a pin has been really valuable for Node. It's really nice to see those in the wild as a contributor, and also people really appreciate them, and having them as an exclusive to that is really nice. But yeah, it's not necessarily a great way to building a massive contributor base.
It would help us to understand better, or to prioritize the goals of what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Especially as we change this up. Folks have made the point that even if there is 0% retention of contributors, it still has value. But then we've also discussed the point that we'd like to see retention.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was getting somebody, I think part of it was trying to overcome the barriers. And one of the barriers that people would have is how do I get through the PR review process, right? Mm-hmm. And actually that might be interesting. As you go to multiple projects, for example, I have no idea what it takes to get a PR into any of the other projects. and something that basically got everybody comfortable with how to contribute to any one of the projects might actually get more cross-pollination, for example. But you're right that, like, what is it that we want to get out of it is kind of the key. What's the problem we're solving, and how does this help in that front would be a good place to start.
So from a tactical standpoint, is this something that we want to leave on the agenda, or do we feel like we need more possibly time cooking the idea a little bit before coming back to the CPC meeting with something new?
I think we can riff async, at least for this one.
Okay. Great.
I guess we just need to figure it out for the December version, right?
And I believe that the collab summit planning group, which has been meeting on a weekly cadence, is kind of trying to carry that work as well, in addition to planning the collab summit, kind of figuring out the code and learn with that kind of goes hand in hand. So
good.
Yeah, maybe we'll wait and see what they have to propose here.
One quick thing before we moved on. With this event, while it would be really, really valuable to kick this off in Montreal, and the opportunities for that are basically once a year, would there be any strong objections to not doing it unless we landed on something we were, quite sure would be promising to try?
I don't think there's an objection to, I wouldn't have an objection to not doing it if we don't think we're going to do it well, but that's me.
I'm of the same opinion. Like, we should do it if it makes sense and we think we've got something. If we don't think it makes sense, then we shouldn't force ourselves to do something.
Agreed. Cool.
All right. Moving on to next agenda item number 279 is a pull request to add a draft charter template. We now have reviews from the folks that we asked for specifically, and we're going to need to ask for review from Foundation Legal Counsel. Mike Dolan asked me to work with him to get council's eyes on this. The one open, there were two kind of points that were live on this. There's optional sections, and the question was, how do we want people to signal that they're intentionally not using, filling out a section? I pushed a commit a little while ago that includes the phrase section intentionally left blank, to indicate that if you're not using an optional section, please use this phrase to be purposeful about it. The second open question was raised on the section titled, it's currently titled Establishment of the Project TSC. And there was some discussion on whether we wanted to rephrase that to, because it might be unclear, it might be misunderstood, to focus on project leadership or project structure. I don't feel very strongly about this, so in terms of what that phrase is, so I thought maybe a moment or two just getting thoughts would help spark what the right sentence should be. Mike, you had proposed project leadership of the project. Was there something that was or feeling better about that to you, or?
I think that the few people had, so basically somebody had suggested leadership, and somebody had suggested project structure. sort of having read through those different options, project leadership seemed to be the clearest to me.
Mm.
You know, it's, I think, you know, establishment of the TSC is, you know, what we considered as the project leadership. And so that's just the words that came that sound good to me. But I know I would almost suggest, I don't see anybody commenting one way or the other. So whatever sounds good to, does anybody else have any comments on leadership, project structure, or project leadership?
I would suggest a governing body here again, since it's defined somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Well, governing body I do kind of like, because it would indicate that it's like, I mean, I like that because it seems to be more open, I suppose.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me from the consistency perspective. Reusing the same words makes lots of sense.
We have the best words. Okay, I'm down for governing body. So I will make that change and then make sure this gets sent to Andy today. All right. Moving us down into some new issues from this week. We've got number 274, which is governance for the first term of voting members. I actually can't remember who opened this PR.
I believe I opened that.
Okay, great.
Let me just open it up again to remind myself, because it was a little while ago.
You did open this.
Basically, we just had the discussion of trying to line up, or not necessarily line up, but provide the opportunity that once the new representatives get elected, that they have the option of coming to the Collaborator Summit. And so instead of just making it a year from when we started this year, the suggestion was that we should make it so that they could actually make the Collaborator Summit, which we've often had around JSConf EU, which may not happen next year at that time. But we picked, in the end, it was, a few adjustments, but March 31st. And, just being that would give enough time to get to whatever that other Collaborator Summit is. The implication is it means like the first term for all the existing members will be shorter. And so it basically just says the term is 1 year, except for the first year, where, all voting members, the term will end 31st, and then subsequent terms is 1 year, basically the becoming effective the 31st of each year.
I'm a fan of tying it to a calendar date, and I'm a fan of that calendar date being toward the end of Q1, just because it does help for the summer conferences and rest of the year foundation event planning. So, I mean, that seems good to me, good idea to me.
So I think this is one where it's been open for 21 days. There's 3 approvals. So unless there's objections, we can probably agree to land it here.
No objections that I can hear. So I think we're good.
Okay.
All right. Yay. I'm going to clap.
That probably also resolves issue 214.
214. Let's see. Yeah, I think you're right. Cool. Yeah. So, Emily, do you want to maybe make a comment on that issue and
Sure,
close?
I'll do that. Yeah.
Good. All right, number 242, Collaborator Summits at Node.js Interactive Repo. Manila and Christian, do either of you want to speak to where we're at with this? And Mateo is also open to this issue, but he's not available today.
Yeah, with this particular one, we had two options: either create a brand new Summit repo, Summit repo in OpenJS, or import it or transfer it from Node.js. We had some explicit +1s in the thread in OpenJS Foundation, but then we made a new issue in admin. So far, no objections. It's been open for 6 days. I posted a comment for any final comments from people. Unless there are any objections, I can start the process to port it over to this one. The goal would be to preserve the history of the Collab Summit as we elevate it up to the purview of the CPC.
Right, and I think that just happens provided we just move the repo, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So are we agreed that we should just do it? Like, do you think we've waited 6 days seems a reasonable amount of time? Do you think we should just, or do you want to wait a few more days? What's the plan on that front?
I mean, it's not an urgent matter, so if we wait for a couple of days, it doesn't hurt really much.
Okay. Okay, so we're basically going to wait for a few more days. If no objections, then Manil will go ahead and do it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Awesome. And now that moves us to our last meeting item, which is the review of the post-bootstrap board. Mouthful there. So let me actually go to the board itself. Post-bootstrap board is number 3, and I'll pop that into the Zoom for us real quick. Boom. Right. All right. Starting with the progress, in progress items, number 160, document/define initial process for handling reports. We have a PR for this, I believe. And that
Manil has a PR open.
Manil, what do we need to do to help close this PR?
Could you give me a moment? I need to open this up.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I was looking at it earlier today. There are a number of comments. My main comment is still that it's not aligned with the rest of the text necessarily.
That's right. Yeah, I did not rework it to refer to the code of conduct. So as I understand, your comment was around making sure they worked well together, like it was coherent.
Yeah, it's like the other one talks about like a code of conduct panel and describes who's in it. And so this should either refer to that as in terms of like, how does the code and conduct panel get involved? Or the PR should be extended to change that wording so that they both talk about the same thing.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'll do another pass at it and make sure they are talking about the same thing, and then we could do comments.
Sounds good. And I think Miles had a few specific comments as well, but obviously you can cover those at the same time.
Totally.
Yeah, all my thoughts were there in the issue. I think some of my biggest concern, like my number one big concern that I had was like you had it in there that reporters needed to be consulted before anything was made public in the way in which it was made public, which may or may not be in line with how we want to be transparent about things. Like if things are made anonymous, we still may want to have some degree of anonymous reporting of things, like from a postmortem perspective. So just the language in there seemed, maybe a little terse.
So it sounds to me like it's a bit restrictive. We want the ability to be able to discuss some items in public, but definitely not, for example, personal.
It should not, the reportee should be able to ask, the reporter in reportee should be able to request anonymity, but they should not necessarily be able to say, hey, we don't want anything about this made public. Also, another one that was kind of big for this, you've only created a single file for the proposal. There is a template for making proposals. And if you take a look inside of the proposals directory, there is a template file. I'm going to drop it in the chat right now. A bunch of stuff that is inside of the proposal right now that are framed as questions should be inside of that template instead.
Okay, cool. Thanks for the link. I will use that to extract the questions that we haven't yet addressed.
Yeah, and then like in general, if there's things that need to be filled in, they could be TBD. But if there's like hanging questions or things that we aren't sure about, or just like kind of the meta discussion of the document itself, makes more sense within kind of a README for the proposal. If you look at the other proposals, there's good examples of how that looks.
Super. I've made a note of that and the link. Thank you. Cool. I'll have some action on this between now and the next meeting. And
then I guess one last thing that might be worth exploring, and I mentioned it, is there's a tool called Beacon that's being worked on by Coraline, the same individual who helped push forward the contributor covenant. And there are other tools that may be better than GitHub issues as a means of kind of like keeping track of things and making sure, for example, that if we have an SLA or we want to have a certain degree of response, that we're able to like take care of that. If I recall correctly, you can spin up your own instance of Beacon and then make multiple projects within Beacon, like have their own individual like reporting channels. But as we scale up to serve like 31 different projects, I doubt all 31 are going to have things hit the fan in the same day. But we may need something slightly more sophisticated to ensure that things don't fall through the cracks.
That is super useful. I was not familiar with the details of the Beacon project. I did list it in the final section under what to look forward to. So I'll extract that actually into the unanswered questions as something we could possibly use and put that in the README. That makes sense.
That makes sense.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just agreeing.
Okay. I was just going to add, like, I would favor us to get something that's simple but workable and land that versus delaying to get a full featured and then do the full, do a more full featured one as a follow-on, just so that we actually, I guess it depends. If it's like a week to get the full featured one, great. But it'd be nice to have something in place just in case we do get a report, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, what I'm suggesting right now is more just like documenting these as possibilities.
Right.
At the very least, Brian's not on the call, but maybe Jory knows. I think report at already works.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it possible once this lands though to to still use it as a stage 1 proposal? It doesn't have to graduate all the way before we can start just implementing some of it, does it?
I think it depends.
Go ahead.
I think that we could maybe lift parts of it as documentation, play it by ear and see. We could also like break it into multiple proposals and try to push through a proposal faster of kind of like an MVP. So like introducing Beacon, for example, or like more in-depth process could be their own proposals, separate from something that's just about reporting or coming up with a moderation team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think getting something in place is the first priority, and then making sure that is well tooled and all that can be a follow-on.
Yeah. I think getting something in place is possibly also blocking us from completing the onboarding checklist for existing projects. So if we can get, something that they can use and refer to just to get started, that would be super duper.
It's nice to see our process evolve.
Yeah, and any one of these should be able, even if it's stage 3, I don't know if we have it explicitly, but we need a way that you update a stage 3 proposal, right? So, I mean, these should constantly be getting updated as we need to update them.
Right. Like an update shouldn't have to go through like 3 stages.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe not. I don't know. I wasn't thinking along those lines. I was just more thinking along the lines of none of these things, just because we've got them at stage 3 doesn't mean that, okay, now they're done and we can't change them or enhance them, right?
We've already been doing that for some proposals, making changes to the proposal, like documents and stuff. And I think we could tease out the bits that need to be their own proposals versus being updates to existing process.
Right.
And we could kind of do that on a case-by-case basis as we have. So like, arguably, like the governance changes that we're making could have been their own proposals, but they don't really need to be. For what it's worth, like Manila TC39, which is kind of, inspired this process, changes to the spec, some of them can come in just as pull requests directly against the spec without a full proposal. Those do end up going to the committee to approve, and more or less, like if no one objects to them going through as pull requests, they go through as pull requests. And if someone says, I feel like this should be a proposal, then it turns into a proposal. So we really could just work in expecting people to be honest and just, if you feel like something doesn't need to be a proposal, put it in as a pull request and trust that if people disagree with that, they'll speak up.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, that sounds good. So it's at the committee's discretion, which is fair.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds like we have a path forward on this on these related issues. I'm looking at the time. We're at 2:55. Let me see. What do we think we can get? We do have number 263, which is improved governance for regular members. There's some related PRs. Miles and Mike, do you want to give, Michael, do you want to give any update on the work there?
Sure, I can let me pull that up. So basically it's just an addition to the governance to basically say what the requirements are and the process to be followed. Basically it says, as we've already got in the existing governance /charter, the regular member adds a PR to add themselves. This clarifies that when it's approved, when there's no outstanding exceptions, there's 2 more approvals by voting CPC members. The PR has been opened at least 1 week. I just chose 1 week as a time frame, which is enough time for people to notice. But I have no strong feelings if people think that should be longer or shorter. And then it adds in that, once the PR is ready to be landed, the CPC member who lands it needs to send a notification to the project contacts, because we've said that, regular members need to be part of a project for 3 months. And this is kind of our low touch way of validating that. And it's what we agreed to do. And that they also be added to the CPC regular members. Thank you, Miles, for fixing that team, and introduced at the next CPC meeting. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna ask how long this one's been open, because I feel like we should be ready to land it. Yes.
Yeah, this one I only opened 4 days ago, and it changed the governance. So I think at this point it's like everybody, this is awareness. Please go in, comment, and this has to wait the 14 days. So we're not ready to land anyway.
Okay. Great. Okay, so everyone take a look at that and add any +1s or questions or comments. I'm not going to try and get through any more because we are basically at the top of the hour. I will instead thank you all for coming and ask if there's any other business to bring today before we wrap up. No? Okay, cool. I will now stop the share.